welcome back to another episode with Fight Night Picks. As always, we're brought to you by SimBody. Vertiball is now SimBody. If you head on over to their website, simbody.com, you're going to get all the great products that you know and love, including the SimBody Vertiroller and the Vertiball that you have seen most likely here in studio. Look at that. Place it, lock it, attach it, Vertiball, all sorts of great stuff over there if you want to roll out those old tired muscles and you don't want to go with that old lacrosse ball. They're also coming out with that very new product that you can see right in front of you. And if I head on over to my cart, look at that. I've already got a Vertiball over there. Little bit of a deal right there. And if you hit the try for 60 days risk-free, use the promo code FNP and you're going to get 10% off your order. With that code FNP at simbody.com, you're really helping out another local company here in New Brunswick, Canada. Can't wait for it. The new name, SimBody at simbody.com. And as we always say, let's get into it.
A last look at the big card. Be sure to head into the chat and have your say. Let's get into it and join in Fight Night Picks Kicks.
And just like that, we're back and getting set for UFC 289, the 11-fight card that it is, coming at you from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And Matt, there were a lot of people that said, this is in your backyard. My goodness, it's the second biggest country by landmass in the world, and it's 5,400 kilometers away, so that's a pretty damn big backyard. But Matt, it is back in Canada. The UFC is back for the first time since 2019. We're not the first ones to tell you that. John Anik's probably going to beleaguer the point tonight, but what I do know is that one cool cat that's on this card has one of the coolest coaches of all time who decided that, hey, we got to bring back a Bryant Reeves jersey. They brought a big country jersey for Dan Ige, and it was Coach Eryk Nixick that pulled that out of his bag of tricks. So listen, Eryk Nixick, like a BC native Nardwuar, doing cool things. Matt, do you think Nardwuar is going to be in attendance for this?
Probably not, but he probably knows weird facts about all the fighters. I'm actually way more excited about this pay-per-view heading into this fight week than I thought I was going to be. You know, the main event, it kind of gets shuffled around, right? Aldana originally had a previous matchup. She now gets put in against Amanda Nunes, but I'm pretty excited for this fight. I think Aldana and her skill set is going to offer a really difficult matchup for Amanda Nunes on the feet, and it should be interesting, right? Because we talked about it a lot. Jermaine Duranami started to chip away, right? She had success in the feet, but got taken down a lot, and if Aldana is going to have success in this matchup, it's probably going to look a little bit like that fight, so I'll be really interested to see if Aldana can use her footwork to really maintain that distance and stay away from Nunes, because we know how talented of a striker Aldana is, and how wild would that be if Nunes is upset again in one of these kind of all-time fights?
It would be something else, and obviously Juliana Pena, she's been out there all week campaigning for another fight. She does a terrible job at it. Her chatter is so bad. But when you do look at it overall, people are going to ask the question, is the number 12 on it? It's number 10. It's Mike Bibby, an OG, really actual Grizzly, a great Atlanta Hawk. But I know a lot of people, they want to talk about the co-main event. I threw it out there here in the community tab, so make sure you hit up that poll there. Oliveira taking on Dariush. Obviously, as you know, with Fight Night Picks Kicks, well, maybe you don't. This could be the first time we reference the poll results. That can be found at Fight Night Picks. You can find it there. Yeah.
Yes, it's live.
Is it live? Of course it's live. It's live every Saturday, 2 hours before the prelims. But what I mean to say is that over on Instagram, in our story, you can vote on those fights and let us know who you think is going to win. But yeah, the co-main event gets a lot of the shine. So why don't we throw it on over to the fight of the night screen? Now, I picked these two unbeknownst to you. However, Dariush versus Oliveira, it seemed like the guy with the full send t-shirt didn't want to say that the winner in this one gets a title shot. But when you look at a logjam 155, we said it at the start of the week, Oliveira Dariush, McGregor Chandler, Gaethje, BMF belt against Dustin Poirier. There's a lot of irons in the fire, but this one is kind of one of those people's main events, co-main event, 3-round fights.
It should be an incredible fight, too, because both guys could win this fight any imaginable way. First round knockout, second round knockout, third round submission by decision. Like, they are both very well-rounded, even though they can somewhat fight as specialists. And I think they do represent maybe two of the more kind of just high-level and skilled fighters we have in the UFC at this point. And like I've said a lot, they're fighting each other at a really important part as at their respective careers. Because for Dariush, and this has been talked about a lot during this fight week, he's had this great win streak, but he is kind of lacking that one massive name on his resume. If you beat Charles Oliveira, you can't really say that anymore. And for Oliveira, I couldn't tell you the last time he was in a boring fight. I know he laid an egg the last time out against Islam Makhachev, but guess what? A lot of people do that unless you're Alexander Volkanovski, I guess. So I think this could be an incredible fight.
48 Perry saying, OG, Bibby, Tara Culverwell tuning in from New York. How are you? AWMD saying Canadians are gonna win. AWMD also saying go Bronx by knockout. Ice Viking likes the threads. And Chris saying the champion has a name. Juliana Pena. She's gonna be champ again, Matt. Moving forward, I mean, this is the one that's kind of gotten all the shine throughout fight week. Dan Ige taking on Nate Landwehr. Dan Ige's ranking on the line against Landwehr. Landwehr on a 3-fight win streak, 3 bonuses in those fights. And if you do look at it for Landwehr, he's had crazy ups and downs in just a few fights in the UFC. So I can't wait to see what we're going to get. I mean, if you look at it, a guy like Landwehr, he was able to reach such high highs with M1 Global in spots he was supposed to lose in. And we actually have a fighter next weekend that's going to be making his UFC debut that was put in spots to lose against those fighters and lost over at the ACA, and Felipe Bunis. But when you look at this matchup, Matt, Landwehr, Ige, both guys can grapple. Both guys can strike, and they excel in the scrambles. That's what makes it a fun fight.
And what makes this really fun is Nate Landwehr could have a fight of the night in an empty ball pit. Because he just has one of those styles where he's going to be aggressive. He's going to eat his shot to give his own shot. We have seen that throughout his UFC tenure. His aggression's going to give him a lot of success, but it's also going to get him caught by some big shots. And for Dan Ige, this is a bit of a reset, right? We have seen him fight a lot of the guys at the top of the division, and he hasn't always been able to break through. But this should be a fun matchup, right? Because for Ige, even when he does fight those high-level guys, he makes a great account of himself. So if he can get past some of those big flurries of Nate Landwehr, it should be a really entertaining fight.
Should be a big one. And again, let us know throughout the video who you have in the matchups. If you're so inclined, you can hit up the super chat and help out the channel. And if you can't, you can toss a like and get this ball rolling as the show moves forward. And again, if this is the first time tuning into Question Mark Kicks, what we do, we start at the bottom of the card, we go all the way to the top. We talk about the week that was and if anybody missed weight, but nobody missed weight. Didn't even have to knock on wood, but nobody missed weight, so that is awesome to see. Kairos MMA. I haven't seen it in a long time. Hooligan in me thinks wants Nate to win. The Calm Cool Collective in me says Ige. So when we do look at this one overall, main event, Nunes, Aldana up at the top for the bantamweight belt. But to kick off the card, Matt, adopted Canadian Diana Belbita taking on Maria Oliveira. And why do we do a show at the end of the week? Well, it's to talk about things that happened throughout the week. And one thing that happened throughout the week was Maria Oliveira did a podcast with MMA Fighting and said, yes, I was on a reality show during camp, but they kicked me off early, but I did it. Maybe I shouldn't have, but I'm going to be fine. So Oliveira taking this fight against Diana Belbita. Style for style, very similar fighters. Very. They walk forward, throw arm punches, and leg kicks, and that's pretty much it. But obviously, you kind of hate to hear that out of Oliveira, and the worst part of it was kind of alluding to the fact that the UFC, they just cut people at random. And for somebody like Oliveira, 1-2 in the UFC, the win...
Would it be that random?
The win, a split decision win over Gloria De Paula, who beat Belbita, and that win that Oliveira had over De Paula sent De Paula packing. So it'll be interesting to see what we get in this one. Craig Hart, Oliveira looks good looking. Might actually watch. Looks good looking. Might actually watch. Maybe a tongue twister there. But when you do consider this matchup, Matt, I know we're split on the pick.
It comes down to volume. And that's really what this fight comes down to. Because you're right. They fight in a very similar manner. And I doubt it's going to end inside the decision. Like, maybe it could. But neither fighter has hellacious knockout power. Neither fighter fights like a Demi and Maya. So I do expect it to go to a decision. And I think Oliveira just slightly has that volume edge on her side. She does rush forward and throw kind of reckless abandon type shots. And against some of those high level strikers, you do worry about her getting countered, getting taken down as a result. But in a fight where I do think volume is going to be the thing that matters most, that's why I do side with Oliveira ever so slightly.
And I think Belbita is going to have better volume, better movement on the feet. Prince Vegeta-san, Nunes didn't take a dive in the first fight. That's just silly. But when you do consider this matchup here, Oliveira and Diana Belbita, Lucky Day keeps asking if I've seen Kid Cannabis. I did years ago on early Netflix, and it's an awful movie. 59% going with Belbita over on her Instagram. It is a close fight. For me, I think Belbita does get the win in the matchup. Oliveira, I don't necessarily love. Oh, yeah. Why not just do that
I
reality
don't think
show?
the winner of this is fighting for a title, though.
No,
And I think that's fair
no.
to say.
This is the lowest of women's strawweight, but yeah, I'm gonna go with Belbita in the matchup. Ultimate expert analyst Oliveira might give up her back to a sloppy get up defense. Yeah, we'll see how that one goes. Matt David Dvorak. That's what they say when he fights over in Europe, but when he fights in the UFC, they're gonna say Dvorak, like Radek Dvorak.
If John Anik says it, I'm not going to say he's wrong.
I'm going to say what he says himself, and you don't need to shout about it. He's taking on Steven Erceg, and when you look at a matchup like this, for Dvorak does everything right, does some things wrong, and when you look at a guy like Erceg, that jiu-jitsu's lights out. And I gave a read to Cage Side Press and Sean Bitter's write-up that he had on Erceg coming into today. They released it on fight day. And it kind of mirrored what we had said in the fact that Erceg's one of those guys that's lights out with the jiu-jitsu. He's like a dog on a bone with his takedown attempts. His striking's pretty basic. He gets hit a lot by right hands in just about every single fight. But he's in it to win it from minute to minute. And if you look at a guy like Erceg, 9-1 right now, a big win streak. He was originally supposed to make his UFC debut last month. That fight got shuffled around, and Dvorak was supposed to be taking on Matt Schnell in this matchup. A battle of top 10 fighters. Now Dvorak gets to keep it moving, and he gets to take on a guy outside of the rankings and look to get a win again, because Dvorak was on, a 16-fight unbeaten streak coming into and including the UFC, and only lost to Kopp and Nicolau.
And that's been the weird thing about Dvorak up until this point. He'll show you flashes of brilliance, but he'll also show you the ability to get tagged. And he is a very steady fighter, but it's almost to his detriment at some points, because if you are really aggressive, you can fluster him in some moments. And if he does get behind in fights, it is kind of difficult for him to really go out there and commit a big action. Now, I'm not saying he can't go out there and get a takedown, get good ground and pound, but he doesn't have kind of that big knockdown power. He has more of a steady style, but I do think that steadiness is what's going to get him the win in this fight. I like the jab. I like the straight down the middle shots, and the thing is, if Erceg does find himself really starting to reach for those takedown attempts, like David Dvorak's not some easy guy who's going to be taken down just because you're really dedicated to that kind of a strategy, but what I will say is I can see this being a much closer fight by the time the decision rolls around than what people might assume. I can see it being one of those like 29-28 where the loser really gains the respect of a lot of people.
Yeah, Erceg taking this fight on 11 days notice. It's been asked by Ultimate Expert Analyst multiple times over there. So 11 days notice for Erceg in the matchup, but he was originally getting ready for UFC debut, as I said, not that long ago. And Erceg, in an amateur tournament in 2019 when he was already a pro, lost in the finals at bantamweight to Dennis Bondar, who fights next weekend. So that's exciting stuff. A Bondar fight after dislocating his elbow disgustingly against Canadian Malcolm Gordon. So we do look at the matchup. Dvorak is a big favorite in this fight. And if we have a look at Fight Night picks for the total votes on this one, not close, 74% with Dvorak. I think Dvorak, better striker on the outside, strings together the combinations. If you watched him over with Octagon, he give up the takedown every now and again, but he is very much one of those guys that excels in the scrambles himself. So for Dvorak, we've seen that a bit in the UFC. We saw him against Jordan Espinoza land those great leg kicks. Erceg's one of those guys that stands really tall, and he's one of the bigger guys that you're going to find in the flyweight division. But at the same time as that, he doesn't have a long reach, so his jabs sometimes whiff on air. He throws that really good straight right hand, and he will mix in that left hook. You saw that against Loga in their rematch, or the first fight in the rematch. He was able to get the sub. So I like Erceg. I hope he's one of those guys that gets to stick around in the UFC for some time. Hopefully it's a 4-fight deal and we get to see him on a full camp. For me, I'll go with Dvorak in the matchup out of Czechia. But yeah, this should be a fun fight while it lasts.
Yeah, I'll get David in the matchup. It's tough to beat a guy who's in the rankings on short notice.
It is a tricky one for sure. But we did see, fellow Australia, Jamie Mullarkey in that Imavov fight. Yikes, last weekend.
But also Jim Miller. Like, there's 1,000 examples going both ways, but for the most part, it's pretty hard to beat ranked fighters.
Next matchup, Kyle Nelson. 1-4-1 in the UFC. His last time out, he won because Doo Ho Choi landed an illegal headbutt, and Chris Tognoni said, I don't need any of that. So when you do consider this matchup, Matt, Nelson in need of a win. The last time that we saw him in Canada, was it not? I guess he fought and lost twice in Canada. He fought on the Ottawa card, and he also fought on the card in Toronto in his debut against CDF. He got finished in that one up a weight class on a few days' notice, 2 days' notice. So for Nelson, he gets to kind of try and pick the pieces back up after a decent showing against Choi, where he primarily wrestled, but he struggled with the striking of Choi. He gets to take on Blake Bilder, who gets dropped in most fights, but in his last two, he looked great against Canada's Alex Morgan. He got the submission win on Contender Series, and he also got the win against Shane Young across the world in Australia. So when you look at a matchup like this, I'm eager to see who has who over there in the comments section. Sean V, how is Nelson even in the UFC? LOL. Well, that's just rude. Al Cheeks is saying Craig Morant. It's a Mike Bibby jersey. And when you do look at this one, yeah, walking papers, Bilder's got to win, so probably not. But yeah, Kyle Nelson definitely needs a win if he wants to stick around.
For Blake Bilder, it just comes down to, can he minimize the mistakes that he makes? Because I do think he is the better striker in total, but you're right, he has been clipped, he has been hurt in many of his fights, and he's a guy who, when he gains confidence, he will start to open up with his strikes a little bit more, and he can get clipped as a result of it. So if Kyle Nelson can use his wrestling to kind of keep his head out of danger, especially in those early moments, I think it could take a bit of the zip off Blake Bilder's strikes, and it could make this fight very even going down the stretch, but Kyle Nelson's also been clipped before. Kyle Nelson also isn't as complete of a striker as Blake Bilder. Now, if Bilder does start to really open up with some of those big hooks, maybe Nelson can crack him with a shot, get him to the ground, and really start to dominate with some of his top control. I just think Blake Bilder, to go along with the power, he's got pretty good hand speed too, and I think if he does hurt Nelson, he's going to be able to really put a flurry on him.
And I mean, Bilder getting hit by right hands when he was CFFC champ, getting dropped, that is something that you worry about. And for Nelson, he brings that big storm, but sometimes he chases the fighters. You saw it when he took on, I wanted to say Matt Schnell. What's the last name that I'm looking for here? Not Matt Schnell. He's out of California. He's not in the UFC anymore. It was Matt Sales. Matt Sales. He got twisted in a real UFC fight. But Matt Sales was able to pitter-patter on the outside, turn and turn and turn, and do a lot of the striking. Even when Nelson went for the wrestling, the counterattacks of Sales were what got it done in that matchup. So if we have a look at Fight Night picks for the total poll on this one, it is not close whatsoever. 84% going with Blake Bilder out of California in the matchup. Flame boxing the gym for Bilder. So for me in this one, I do have Bilder. Obviously, him getting hit and clipped and dropped in the fights before he even made it to Contender Series, it worries me. But in this matchup, I will go with Bilder.
Same here. I also have Blake Bilder.
Good handoff, Matthew. Matt,
that was just...
Aiemann Zahabi's taking on Aoriqileng, and this is probably the hardest fight that I have to try and make a pick on throughout the week. Like, if you look at a guy like Aiemann Zahabi, a really good right hand, he's good in all areas. It's just trying to bring all the techniques together. And we chatted about this one at the start of the week saying, listen, it's a champ camp for Zahabi. He's got Alex Morgan there to work in that big right hand. Saibi Yakub Kakrakhmanov. He's got Xavier Alaoui there as well at a TriStar. And for Zahabi, it's bringing together a consistency. And as we had mentioned as well, his brother's no longer his manager or at least booking his fights. He's got Dana Rubenstein doing that out of Ruby Sports. So he wants to be active 2 or 3 fights a year. And that would be great to see for Aiemann Zahabi. But we've seen that big right hand. Most recently, he was able to show it off against Draco Rodriguez. For Zahabi's last time out, he gets the win over Ricky Tercios. Tercios landing tons of volume, but nothing on the volume. And the craziest part about that is today I watched that Tercios Argueta fight twice to get ready for Argueta's fight next weekend. That's one of the wildest tough fights you're ever going to see. But for Tercios against Zahabi, not all that great. So for Zahabi, he knows that Aoriqileng is going to come with the right hand instead of the jab. He knows that Aoriqileng is going to reach for his takedowns, but also struggle with the takedown defense. So when I look at this matchup, Matt, I like Aoriqileng's toughness because I've seen him get dropped multiple times, only to zombie back into a fight like he did against Jeff Molina. But this is one of those tricky fights where he was 0-2 at flyweight to start his UFC career, now 2-0 at bantamweight, looking to keep rolling. And both these guys right now on 2-fight win streaks.
I think Aoriqileng's game plan is going to be really important because he's a guy who is very aggressive and he will shoot for a lot of takedowns. If he is able to get his opponent up against the cage, he is a very aggressive fighter in that capacity to where he'll try to mix his striking with his takedown attempts. And for Zahabi, we have seen him be willing to move backwards, try to set up that big right hand. Now, if Zahabi is waiting a little bit too much, trying to set up that power shot, I could see Aoriqileng going for the hips and trying to implement some of the wrestling. But the weird thing is, it's not like that's a part of his skill set that you can always rely on, right? Like, he is a good wrestler offensively when he is implementing it, but we've seen him get taken down himself, and it's not always something he will do to a high volume. So for Aoriqileng, I do think it's going to come down to what kind of a game plan does he come into the cage with, because I do think him being kind of that wrestle boxer is what can get him the win in this matchup.
And I mean, a couple of big gyms, like I said, TriStar taking on one Fight Ready MMA, so I'm going to get all excited about Santino DeFranco and Eddie Chan. I'll probably tweet about it over there in the comments section. We have a couple, so QXXX saying, let's get into it. Is that like a sign for Zion? We've talked about him a lot off air, but that guy wanted to get into it.
Almost 400 watching, 68 likes. Hit that like button, guys.
Good for him. There's also another one up there from PN209. Why didn't you go to the event? My geography is very bad, so I don't know how far it is from you. If you drove from Miami to Los Angeles, that's 600 miles less than it would be from where we're at to Vancouver. It's a 54-hour drive if we wanted to drive to Vancouver. Not going to happen. When it does come to this one, I mean, the total votes at Fight Night Picks, 50-50 is the split. And again, I've talked a lot about Aiemann Zahabi in this one. I can't get myself to pick him, but if you want it, just, again, I would not necessarily be surprised. So both of us on this one going with Aoriqileng to get the win. And for Aiemann Zahabi, we've seen him kind of have to dig down and get, tough, even in his UFC debut against Vieira, which was in Halifax, Nova Scotia. That was a really close fight. In this next one, Matt, we have Miranda Maverick taking on Jasmine Jasudavicius. And again, there's a lot of synergy between the camps of the Canadians on this one. You've got Kyle Nelson and Diana Belbita out of House of Champions in Stony Creek, Ontario. You've got Jasmine Jasudavicius out of Niagara Top Team in Niagara, Canada, not Buffalo. But if you look at it for Jasudavicius, training with Mike Malott, because Mike Malott just hovers between Stony Creek and Niagara and trains at both of those gyms. So pretty cool to see that one right there. But when you do look at a fight like this, both these women butter the bread with their grappling and with the wrestling. Moreover, Jasudavicius, a silver medalist in freestyle, Canadian freestyle wrestling. Miranda Maverick, we've seen her with the takedowns, even getting a win over another Canadian out of the Niagara region in Jillian Robertson. So some interesting parallels there. But when I look at a fight like this, Matt, I mean, Maverick, all the upside in the world in 2020, faltered against now top-ranked competition in Macy Barber as well as Erin Blanchfield, and she looked really good her last time out, whereas Jasudavicius, it's kind of been up and down throughout the UFC tenure, but 2-1 overall, and a big win over Gabi Fernandez, who's going to be competing next weekend. So I think this is a big-time fight. Jasmine called out the UFC for a fight in Canada after her last win over Fernandez, and she gets it. So I think this is going to be a big fight. A lot of people saying upset over there in the chat.
I do see that, and it could be in the cards. Personally, I don't have it. Like, that is my prediction. I think Miranda Maverick's the more complete fighter between the two. You're right. Do they both go for wrestling? Do they both like their takedowns and ground and pound? Yes, they do. But on the in-betweens, I do think Miranda Maverick has a lot more to offer. We've seen the elbows. We've seen the boxing. I'm not saying it's the most devastating by any means, but I do think what her ability to throw damaging shots on the feet can outweigh what Jasmine Jasudavicius can on the feet.
And Jasudavicius, you'll see it out of her. She'll throw a nice 1-2 down the pipe. She will throw a little bit of a leg kick here and there, but it's not a statement hallmark of her game. But when you look at a fight like this, it's a clash of styles in the fact that you have one southpaw fighter in Maverick. Orthodox is Jasudavicius, and if you look at it, it opens up that right cross that we've seen out of Jasudavicius. It also opens up the body kick that Miranda Maverick likes to throw a lot. So if we have a look at Fight Night Picks for the total votes on this one on our Instagram poll, yeah, 79% going with Miranda Maverick. I see it from Really Bands 22, Jasmine by judge's decision. Kay Demercy saying farm strength wins. I don't know who's coming out of a farm. Sean V, Maverick takedown defense isn't good. Neither is Mackenzie Dern's. So there's a little bit of a reason on that one. But yeah, I'll go with Miranda Maverick in the fight. I saw her excel against Jillian Robertson. I've seen her excel against wrestlers in the past. She struggled with Erin Blanchfield.
But Erin Blanchfield's pretty good.
It could play into the cards for somebody like Jasudavicius, who we've seen a good gas tank out of. And I know she struggled as the fight went on against Natalia Silva when she couldn't get the takedowns. Silva and Maverick, not similar strikers whatsoever. But for me, I'll go with Maverick, and we're in agreement.
Same here, yeah.
All right, both of us going with Maverick. That moves us into the featured prelim. They want you to pay your hard-earned money after watching this fight.
I think it's going to be a good one, though.
Nassourdine Imavov taking on Chris Curtis. Now, why do we do a show at the end of the week? Because you get to learn that Chris Curtis isn't going to have Sean Strickland in his corner. And that's a pretty damn big deal, because Strickland beat Imavov in an impromptu light heavyweight main event back in January. Strickland with the volume, Strickland with the 2-3 combo all day. He was able to land his jab at will. Now, there's parallels, because Sean Strickland walks guys down from an orthodox stance, stands really straight up. Chris Curtis, Philly shell all the time. double, triple up that jab, reset, and occasionally he'll throw some kicks and some big power shots as well. So Chris Curtis, I really love the style, but again, not having Strickland out of the man dance, that could play a factor into it because they've cornered each other throughout their careers, and as they've been in Extreme Couture, have the neighbors.
You are right about that. Just I kind of got to go back to what I said at the start of the week. Whether he's in his corner or his camp, I still don't think Chris Curtis is going to come out and be some tremendous volume fighter. And the volume is the real thing that made Imavov uncomfortable in that fight. Yes, they share similarities to the fact that they are both boxers. They will march their opponent down. You're right. It's just the way that they express that forward movement and their boxing is a little bit different. For Strickland, he is going to try to suffocate you with a lot of his volume. Whereas we have seen Curtis, he has much more of a tendency to kind of wait, try to pick that one big power shot. And that's what I'll be interested to see because I think this fight could have two very different versions. I think this could be a contention for a fight of the night. Like there's a version of this fight where Chris Curtis goes in there, maybe is clipped by a shot early and feels like, hey, I really have to get one back. And we do see that aggressive version of him to where he is pressing the fight because this fight does come down to how aggressive Chris Curtis is because we have seen Imavov. He is comfortable on that back foot. Trust me, he's a good fighter moving forwards, but he is very comfortable on the back foot. So I'll be curious to see how he can make Chris Curtis pay for some of that forward movement.
And we'll see how it works out for a guy like Imavov. Again, this is another matchup where it's orthodox versus southpaw. Curtis is the southpaw. Imavov with that kind of like karate stance where his hands are really low, and he will occasionally throw in that kick to the breadbasket, and that's one where your hands are low, kick to the breadbasket, Curtis comes over with his left hand and clips him. It very well could happen, and for Curtis, he's taken on strikers in the past, and I'll go with Andrea Fialho when they fought at the PFL. Curtis was the one, mixed English martial arts, he was able to get, takedowns and scrambles out of it, and he had a lot of success. So not to say that he's going to go for that in this matchup. We obviously saw Imavov, the one that was able to go out there and submit Edmund Shabazian.
Exactly.
But when certain fighters have wrestled Imavov, he has struggled, namely his fight against Phil Hawes, where it was all the success on the feet from Imavov, all the grappling from Hawes, and in the world of MMA math, Imavov loses to Hawes, and Curtis starched Hawes.
And I think a weird key to this fight could be if Chris Curtis is going for a lot of takedowns, and he does get stuck in some of those in-between positions. Imavov has good elbows. He does have good, weird defensive strikes from odd angles, so I will be curious to see if Imavov can take advantage of some of those positions if they do find themselves in them.
Well, we will see the total votes on this one at Fight Night Picks, a big-time middleweight matchup between Curtis and Imavov, and we get there, 58% going with Imavov, 42% going with Chris Curtis out of Extreme Couture. Shlomo Schmillian saying, Matt and Craig, let's go. My pick in this one, I have Imavov, but like you said, I think this is going to be a close fight, a fun fight.
It probably should be, and I also have Imavov. I think he can strike moving forwards and backwards, whereas if Chris Curtis is caught moving backwards, I think he is going to have to really rely on some of the more big power shots in his arsenal, so I do have Imavov ever so slightly.
And the one time I will say to Sean V, Hawes demolished Curtis until he got caught, though. Hawes demolished Curtis until he got caught, and then you had Buckley was demolishing Curtis until he got caught. It's always rolling downhill until you get caught by Chris Curtis, so it should be a fun fight. And then we move into the pay-per-view portion of the card, and it's Gatineau, Quebec, Canada's own power bar, Marc-Andre Barriault, taking on Eryk Anders, the guy who's in the music video for Wolverine. And so was I.
Eryk Anders, it really comes down to the volume in this fight because we've seen him rely on that big left hand, and what I worry about with Eryk Anders is, does he like his power a little bit too much? Because we talk about it, right? The jiu-jitsu that we don't often see, the takedowns that he can employ, but he is one of those guys who he'll try to wait, and then land that big shot, and when it lands, it is pretty devastating. Like, Eryk Anders is a massive athlete, he does have good hand speed, he does move well on the outside for the fighter that he is, but he isn't the most, high-level depth of knowledge, kind of technique guy, I wouldn't say. So, I think for Eryk Anders, how many damaging shots can he land for the activity that Barriault is going to bring into the cage? Because we know Marc-Andre is going to go in there, go for his takedowns, be that active fighter, just be an aggressive fighter that you really feel his presence with. So for Anders, can he make use of the distance when he is able to create it?
The awkward thing on this one is the fact that Anders is one of those guys that made the move. Now, at one point, he trained out of Alabama, then he made the move over to Fight Ready, and he was getting ready, camps there.
How many times did they mention Nick Saban tonight?
Only once. But Anders looked really good his last time out against Kyle Dawkins, who was recovering from a recent finish loss. Anders was able to go out there, finish him, send him back to CFFC, and then all of a sudden, Anders for this camp, training out of the MMA lab with Jared Cannonier, who's main eventing next weekend. So good looks from a guy like Cannonier, who will pepper in those power shots. Barriault's one of those guys that's going to tap, and then try and land his power, back you up against the fence. I'm eager to see who's the bigger guy in this one because for Barriault, he was a TKO champ in Quebec at middleweight and at light heavyweight. Obviously, Eryk Anders, middleweight and light heavyweight experience as well. And Anders is one of those guys. You become a champ on the regional scene. You beat Brennan Allen. You win 2 fights in the UFC. And then all of a sudden, you're in a main event against Lyoto Machida and you lose a chintzy decision. He had that main event against Thiago Santos. There's been awesome Eryk Anders fights, like his soccer kick knockout win over Tim Williams, where he took his soul. His fight against Dawkins, his fight against Thiago Santos is actually a fight of the night. It's kind of like a mercy fight of the night. Like Sean O'Malley, Chris Mutino was a fight of the night. So I do really, really enjoy the fight, and I actually have a really hard time on the pick because when Anders is on, he's on. Like his fights that he had against Darren Stewart. But when he's off, it's low volume. There's not a lot going on. And I actually myself think this is going to be a big fight because Barriault brings it. He never takes the foot off the gas pedal unless he's struggling himself. So I will go with Marc-Andre Barriault ever so slightly, but again, wouldn't necessarily be surprised if Anders won.
I agree with you on the power bar pick. I just like the activity throughout the fight. Could he get knocked out by a big shot? Yes, he definitely could. He is there to be hit, but if he gets past some of those initial hurdles, I like the overall work rate from Barriault, so that's why I have him in the matchup.
Both of us with Quebec's Marc-Andre Barriault. Matt, we move into the big time fight. Now, he wore number 50 yesterday. Number 50, Bryant Reeves, big country, a man who retired very young. And listen, Ige is going to be taking on Nate Landwehr out of Tennessee. Matt, your head's getting out of the frame.
Sorry, I'm tall.
No, it's because you're sitting close. But when we look at this matchup,
where I normally have to sit, I'm slouching.
Dan Ige and Nate Landwehr, these two guys, a big opportunity on this main card. There's going to be a lot of eyeballs on this fight. Landwehr's really brought it through a fight week. MMA Masters own.
I'm curious if you've seen the same thing I've seen this week. Everybody thinks Dan Ige is going to run over Nate Landwehr. Like, that has been the big consensus I have seen all week long. It's that, hey, Nate, we love the aggressiveness. Everybody's going to want to see this fight. But a lot of people do feel like this is finally kind of that one step too far. Because, like we had said earlier in the week, that Herbert Burns fight, not that that tells you the whole story, but it is a bit of a microcosm for how you do beat a guy like Nate Landwehr. If he's aggressive, he's going to leave an opening. And if he leaves that opening and you have good power, you can make him pay for it. So I've seen a lot of fans going with Dan Ige this week.
And that's the awkward thing. I mean, you had Landwehr supposed to get that first taste of the rankings against Alex Caceres.
That would have been a big fight.
The fight falls through, and ultimately Landwehr takes on Austin Lingo, who had been away for a year plus, almost 2 years, and in the matchup, Landwehr looked really good and Austin Lingo didn't. So when you do look at a matchup like this, for a guy like Landwehr, presses forward, foot's always on the gas pedal from minute 1 to minute 15. If it does get there, plenty of finishes on the record of Landwehr, and it's going to be awkward for that team out of MMA Masters, Daniel Valverde, chief among them, cornering a guy like Landwehr, but also seeing Amanda Nunes in the back. She used to train out of MMA Masters before she went to the big time gym in ATT. So when I look at a fight like this, Dan Ige, he struggled against the wrestling of the Korean Zombie. That's a real thing that actually happened. He couldn't get past the jab of Calvin Kattar and the 1-2s. He really did have a hard time against Josh Emmett if you don't watch the fight. If you just look at it and go, unanimous decision loss, because he gets dropped in the first minute of it, and then he rallies back. He looks really good at moments. He's able to wobble Emmett in the second round.
Fight, to be fair.
Dan Ige in this one, obviously he's got a big time opportunity. Craig Hart does not have him. Inserts inspirational Landwehr quotes.
Let me at least say something positive about Nate Landwehr. If he wins this, I'm going to be excited to see him fight guys in the top 15 to see just how well his style does match up against a lot of these other fighters, because he's a bit of an outlier, right? Like, there's not a ton of fighters out there who fight like Nate Landwehr, and that's what makes him so exciting.
Both of us with Dan Ige in the matchup. Almost 500 tuning in. You could toss us a like. It would be much appreciated. Mike Malott taking on Adam Fugett. This is the, kind of appetizer before the big-time co-main event. And Mike Malott, man, the fans are behind him. So if you look at it for Malott, he's a guy out of Ontario, got his pro MMA start on the East Coast, close to us, down in Halifax. And then he makes the move eventually to California. He's the Muay Thai, the boxing, and the Jiu-Jitsu coach, Team Alpha Male. And then he's since moved his training back to Ontario. I anticipate, if you're looking for Canadian celebrities, his brother plays in the AHL for the Manitoba Moose, Jeff Malott.
Is that worth showing on like camera though.
I bet Jeff gets
I
a
don't
mention, and I bet he gets a fourth line slot next year on the Jets. But when you do look at a fight like this, Matt, Mike Malott, just like a guy that's fighting early on this card with a good record that was with CFFC and Blake Bilder, gets dropped by right hands. And we saw that against Solomon Renfro. We've seen that like in the UFC. He got hit to start the fight against Mickey Gall. The nose was a bleeding, and then he finished Mickey Gall in tight right there behind the black lines. He lands a big shot, and Gall goes down. It's like...
Down goes Gall!
Yeah.
Down goes Gall!
It's wild stuff. But when you look at a matchup like this, again, the hometown guy is Adam Fugett coming out of Eugene, Oregon. And he got a lot of boos when he was at the ceremonial press conference. That was the most vanilla press conference I've ever seen in my life. But when you look at a fight like this, Muay Thai from Fugett. Muay Thai champ is Fugett. Fugett comes out of that southpaw stance. He's gritty. He has a really high, tight guard. He also fought Renfro and knocked him out with a check hook. Fugett's got all the skills to the fact that he hits all three levels. I like to jab at him a lot and the body work that he does, but man, Craig Hart with the super chat, much appreciated there. Loves the Fugett
Thank
stuff.
you, Craig Hart.
And mainly staking, saying people from Oregon are soft. That's rude. But when you look at a fight like this,
The
Matt,
forest looks real nice.
it does. The redwoods. I think Adam Fugett has a great opportunity to surprise the Canadian fans, so it feels like a spot where the Canadians meant to win.
If Mike Malott can make Adam Fugett be a boxer, then Mike Malott should win this fight. But if Adam Fugett can implement his kicks and stay on the outside, then we could see Mike Malott really start to over-exaggerate himself and kind of overcommit to some of these shots. Because, like you've said, Malott's a guy who will reach for his shots. Now, if he lands his power shots, there's not a lot many guys can do to them. He has great hand speed. He has good technique when he is fighting in that composed manner. But if he does find himself reaching, like I said, Adam Fugett could easily end this fight via knockout, and I wouldn't be surprised. But this is a weird fight with how high up on the card it is, I will say, because I don't think either guy has the craziest ceiling, but I do think this is going to be one of the more entertaining fights of the night, without a doubt.
And Adam Fugett, you saw it his last time out. He was a giant underdog against Yusaku Kinoshita, and he goes out there, he drops him, and then he ends up getting on top and just landing hellacious ground and pound. And we've seen from Fugett where he took time off to do the Muay Thai, where his amateur career started in Vancouver, and then he got moving and rolling with his jiu-jitsu, and that's such a great secondary portion of his game to where if you take Fugett down, he's no fish out of water when it does get taken down to the mat. I see AWMD saying Malott fighting for Canada. There's one comment that we do have to address, and it's earlier up on there. Ryan saying Malott is a quitter. When he gets hit, he backs away. Pillow Fist Dowdu put him to sleep in the first. That fight was with World Series of Fighting at 145 pounds, and Malott missed weight, and that was before Team Alpha Male and anything else. But the one thing that is true is the fact that he got hit and rocked in that fight, and he gets finished, and it was a standing TKO victory. He still gets hit and rocked in these fights, so it's not one that I would feel all that strongly about. If we have a look at Fight Night picks for the total votes on this one, I don't anticipate them to be close. Wow. 84% going with Mike Malott. The song that I put on there was Courage for Hugh McClellan, the big time song by the Tragically Hip, and I bet there will be at least one hip reference, and hopefully one of these Canadians walks out to the hip, because if I had to guess, I'd say it'd be Ontario's own Mike Malott and the Kingston's own Tragically Hip. Also the hometown of the Headstones. The Headstones, a big time band. Matt, the pick's Malott for me.
I've also got Mike Malott in the fight.
All right, Matt, we move into the co-main event of the evening. Charles Oliveira taking on Beneil Dariush. You guys over in the comments section, 61% going with Charles Oliveira to get the win. So a lot of fun right there. I think this is a big time fight because for Dariush, he still has that win streak. And it's really impressive. His last time out, he mollywopped my guy, Mateusz Gamrot. And if you look at it for Charles Oliveira, he had an even longer win streak. And he went from fighting guys like Beneil Dariush had fought.
And Nick Lentz 7 times.
Had fought. 3 times Nick Lentz. But Charles Oliveira goes on that win streak. You're beating Nick Lentz and Jared Gordon. Then all of a sudden you're beating Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier. So some wild wins for Oliveira. Doesn't get it done against Islam Makhachev. And we're not the MMA guru, so we won't make fun of Islam Makhachev. But when you do look at this matchup, I mean, Oliveira has all of those skills and sliders turned all the way up when they're on. And sometimes when they're not, the chin can cause them issues. But for Beneil Dariush, the same thing can be said. And what I will say for this one, no infamous sauna shoot-the-box picks this week from the group that goes Blonde Brunson like Charles Oliveira. But Beneil Dariush, I mean, the ring didn't even fit on the scale. He looked drawn out.
He did look drawn out. Here's the thing, Craig. The champion has a name. And it's Charles Oliveira. I'm switching the pick. It's warm in here, too. Here's the thing. I really do think Charles Oliveira has a great chance to win this fight. And I went back and watched a lot of Bilder in preparation for this because this was that fight that I had the hardest time with. You know, former champion, like you said, giant win streak. Bilder himself was on a massive win streak. Like, these are two of the most skilled fighters in the division and really in the UFC. But if Drakkar Klose can hurt you with his boxing combinations, I think Charles Oliveira can knock you out. And I do worry about Oliveira's susceptibility to getting hit by big shots, to being rocked, and even by being held down by a guy like Beneil Dariush, because Dariush held Tony Ferguson down, and Tony Ferguson's pretty difficult to control on the ground. So I think Dariush has all the skills to win this fight, but like you said, I think Oliveira's the same, but with the sliders turned up just a bit. And I think if Oliveira can crack his chin and hurt him, look what happened against Michael Chandler. He needed that one shot to hurt him, and then he immediately got him out of there. I'm going to switch my pick to Charles Oliveira. This might be the first time I've done this in months.
The thing that I don't understand is the fact that Chris is saying people sleeping hard on Charles. 61% of you picked him to win. How's anybody sleeping on Charles Oliveira in the matchup? If we have a look at Fight Night picks for the total votes, are they close to that? Let's see. Yeah, 56% going with Charles Oliveira to get the win. And give me Beneil Dariush. I'll keep it on Dariush because if I switch my pick on question mark kicks, I get it wrong. Eliseu Zaleski dos Santos to Abubakar Nurmagomedov. I got that one wrong because I switched the pick. And Amir Albazi and Kai Kara France, I switched the pick, but I should have gotten them wrong because the judges were terrible in that one, even though I scored the fight for Albazi. So if you look at this one, Matt, I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
How are the judges terrible if you thought the right guy won?
The judges were bad. I mean, scoring the fourth round for Albazi was wild.
Well, I guess.
By Chris Lee.
If you were
the
like,
craziest
oh, the guy
part,
won.
The judges from the main event last weekend are the judges for the main event this weekend. So if that doesn't give you pause, it should. But I do like Beneil Dariush in this one. Again, when it comes down to both of their fights against Tony Ferguson, they were both able to hold him down and control
Oliveira
him.
almost broke his arm.
And when you look at this matchup and you look at the striking, for me, I do prefer Beneil Dariush in this one. I think he can lull Oliveira into some of those more powerful shots. I think Dariush can have a lot of success. If this was a 5-round fight, I'd probably prefer Oliveira based on the experience for the 5-round fights, but for me, it's Beneil Dariush as we go. Brian Witkowski saying Charles by controversial decision. Matt, in the main event of the evening, it's Irene Aldana taking on Amanda Nunes. The likes are appreciated on question mark kicks. And when it comes to this fight, I think this is the reason that, well, the fact that it's an 11-fight card and the fact that this is the main event, it's going to be one of the worst-selling UFC pay-per-views of all time because they jacked up the prices as well. So everything working against them. But when you look at this matchup, awesome to see a new fresh face on the marquee. In Aldana, she was ranked lower and had less wins than Raquel Pennington, who she was supposed to fight last month. Pennington, 124.5 is the alternate for this fight, so awesome to see that one. But when you look at this matchup, Matt, Aldana coming off a wild knockout win that we've really never seen before. The heel kick from bottom up to Chasson that hits her in the liver and gets the finish. For Aldana, she flowed in her grappling in the first round, looked amazing there. Did not look amazing in the second round, but was able to get it done nonetheless. And for Nunes, her second to last fight, she loses to Pena. Her last fight, she mopped Pena. So we will see how this one goes. I think it's going to be a good fight, but a lot of people hot and heavy on Irene Aldana with the pick.
And it does make sense. We've seen Amanda Nunes, I don't think, make a regression with her striking. I just think we start to see the types of strikers she struggles more with.
Did you watch the weigh-in show that they had, the one that's like hours long?
No.
So Dean Thomas was talking about Amanda Nunes, and she went to MMA Masters, didn't like the resistance, went to ATT, didn't like the resistance from the coaches. Now she's at Lioness. And in her fights, when there's a lot of resistance, she wilts. And I found it really harsh, but I guess Dean Thomas trained her on ATT. So
I don't think it's... it could be harsh. It's still the truth. Like, you brought this up. I asked you before our last fight, do you think she'd quit? And you just said, oh, she's the greatest fighter ever. Both those things could be true, you know? Like, you can be the best and still have flaws to your game. Willie Mays had a lot of strikeouts. Babe Ruth didn't hit a home run every at-bat. Like, you're not always at your best every single time you're in there. Great athletes have a bunch of seasons where they'll be like a 10-time All-Star. And then guess what? Midway through that big streak, they won't make an All-Star game because they have an off-season. You can have an off night. For Amanda Nunes, she had an off night, and we do think of her as that GOAT, as the greatest of all time, but you can still have an off night when you are the GOAT. And I do think this fight is going to look a lot like the Jermaine Durandamy fight. I know I've talked about that a lot this week, just because we saw how Amanda Nunes deals with fighters who make her uncomfortable on the feet. Durandamy could stand really far away. Nunes wouldn't really be able to land her own power shots because the hooks aren't able to land on a fighter like Jermaine Durandamy, who can maintain her distance with kicks. Now, Aldana's not going to fight in that same manner with those up the middle attacks, but she has great footwork on the back. She has great power shots too when she's able to plant her feet and really throw. So So I think she can make Nunes uncomfortable on the feet the same way GDR did. The difference is, the similarity I think is going to be, Aoriqileng has been taken down before in the past, and she's been controlled at length in some of these fights, and she is getting better. I do think she's getting better at threatening with submissions and at trying to get back up to her feet, at being a more active fighter, but Nunes has great ground and pound, she has great takedowns, and what was her Achilles heel for the majority of her career? It was her cardio, and she's really been able to fix that throughout this last portion of her career. So for those reasons, I do have Nunes, but I think a lot of people out there are onto something when they think Aldana can make this an uncomfortable fight for her.
Raymond Lucas with the super chat. Brian Bolton, who's that?
I don't know who that is. I'm sorry, Raymond.
I mean, I hate to really shut down a show, but who is this? Who? You hit up the super chat, so I gotta do it. American figure skater Brian Anthony Boitano. Am I supposed to know who that is?
I don't know.
I'm sorry, but I appreciate the super chat. I'm sorry for slowing the show down. When you look at a matchup like this, Matt, for Amanda Nunes and Irene Aldana, like Tessa Virtue was able to do with the Canadian figure skating team. Tessa Virtue, is she going out with Morgan Riley of the Toronto Maple Leafs?
If you think I care about any of it.
Oh, it's a South Park reference. You see, I don't watch South Park. See, that's the trouble. But Matt, when you do look at a matchup like this, Aldana will circle away to her right-hand side. She is one of those fighters that can switch the stance in some of those combos. We've seen that big-time hook that she was able to catch Ketlin Vieira with, and she looked amazing on that one. So a great one from Aldana. That was supposed to originally get her the title shot, but it didn't. She ends up fighting Holly Holm with a broken foot. She loses that fight all over the place. She is controlled in that one. She has obviously gotten a lot better. People are...
when you say people, it's like two people.
A lot of people can't believe that we don't know South Park. I don't watch South Park. Like, how much time do you think I have when we do these videos to not watch fights? It's just pretty much all fights and the occasional video on YouTube. Would I lie to you? The British show? I like watching that on YouTube. But when it does come down to this one, I have Nunes with the grappling edge in the fight. But again, Aldana training with Diego Lopez, who you've seen in the UFC really make a mark in his debut against one Maverick. 67% of the fans going with Nunes in the matchup. So yeah, for me, I've got Nunes. You've got Nunes. It's a fight.
It should be a really fun fight. I'm excited for it.
All right, Matt. So we go back down, up and down through that card, and it is a question mark kicks look that we always do. 11 fight set, almost 600 tuning in. If you toss us a like, that would be much appreciated. Only a 45-minute show because there's not a lot of fights on this one. But next weekend, I know people are looking forward to
a lot of fights.
I'll turn that one down. 14 total fights on this card between Victorian Cannonier up at the top, Joaquim Silva knocked Jesse Ronson to Samurai MMA. And now all of a sudden, Joaquim Silva gets a shot against Arman Zarukian in a big-time co-main event. A very strange co-main event, if I do say so myself. So, Matt, if we do it the right way with question mark kicks, we start at the bottom of the card. The Romanian-Canadian Diana Belbita taking on Maria Oliveira. I have Belbita in the matchup.
I've got Oliveira.
All right, Matt. The next matchup, Dvorak taking on Erceg. Going with Dvorak.
I'll take the Undertaker.
Going with the Undertaker, Matt.
Hopefully this will be like WrestleMania for him, but not that time against Brock Lesnar.
Knocked him out by accident, did he not?
I think he got a concussion, then they had to cut it short.
Carl Nelson taking on Blake Bilder. Going with Blake Bilder in the match.
I've also got Bilder.
All right, Matt. The next one, we have Aiemann Zahabi taking on Aoriqileng. I don't love it, but I've got Aoriqileng.
I've got Archie Long.
That's a sketchy fight. All right, the next one, Matt. Maverick taking on Jasudavicius, going with Maverick.
I've got Miranda Maverick.
Maverick, top gun in it. Matt, Nassourdine Imavov taking on Chris Curtis, a Dvorak Nassourdine Imavov.
I've got Nassourdine Imavov.
Both of us going with Imavov. Then we have Marc-Andre Barriault taking on Eryk Dvorak Barriault.
I've got Marc-Andre Barriault.
Going with Barriault. Matt, the next one, Ige taking on Landwehr. Going with Danny Ige.
I think this is going to be a great fight. Like, this should be interesting because if Ige wins this, does it get another big chance at a top 15 opponent?
Like, it has to be. You think so? You beat Jackson and then you beat Landwehr?
You're right. That is 2 in a row. I just think for Ige, it's odd because he's at the point now where he's kind of at the Derek Brunson point in his career, right? He doesn't really know where to go. He's fought a lot of the guys in the top 15, so hopefully that is what he gets next.
Second best Craig, going with the super chat. He likes to pick a Charlie Olives.
Thank you.
Mike Malott taking on Adam Fugett. this could ruin a lot of people's nights. I still have him a lot, but if you get with those kicks, really does give me pause. He started off strong when he was taking on Michael Morales. He looked amazing against Yusaku Kinoshita, and I think Kinoshita's got a higher ceiling than Malott, or at least I did before the Fugit fight. So I do have Mike Malott in this matchup, but it's a sketchy one if you like Mike.
I've got Mike Malott, but this should be a really fun fight.
Cameron Lyle, how do people pronounce Oregon in real life? That's like people mispronouncing Newfoundland. Matt, Charles Oliveira taking on Benil Dariush. Give me Benny for the win. But Benny in the Jets.
I had Benny, but I saw a brighter light. And in that light, Charles Oliveira was the future lightweight champion. I think he's going to win this fight. I think he's going to fight Islam Makhachev again. And I think we're getting a better version of Charles Oliveira the next time out. I think that was the worst version of him you are ever going to see in your life. And I think there's not another man in this division who has the skill set to beat Islam Makhachev. That's why I've got Charlie Olives in the fight.
Do you think one of these guys that'll shoot the box is going to come out with his dyed blonde hair and he's going to do like a synchronized dance with the rest of the boys? You got to think that they have one.
The amount of respect I would gain for the boy. No, I just think it's going to be a great fight. Like, this should be one of those 5-round co-main events because it deserves to be. The fighters are of that level. They both have great cardio. And it is kind of a title eliminator, so it would be really cool if they get that 5-round experience going into another 5-round fight. But I do have Oliveira. I think there's a compelling argument to be made for either fighter. But I just think Oliveira has the slightly heavier hands, the slightly better jiu-jitsu. And for those reasons, I've got the former champion, Charles Oliveira.
I really like the comment from Nellie Morris, one to your heart. Jeff Hardy was overall a more dominant champ than Khabib ever was.
I would agree with that. He was a far more entertaining champ. I just remember Jeff Hardy
Not AEW Jeff Hardy, it's sad.
He fought Umaga every week for about 7 straight months for my entertainment when I was in grade 4. And guess what? That was great. They would just throw each other off balconies. It was high-level stuff back in the day.
Rest in peace, Umaga was the real one.
He was.
Main
the
event.
Samoan spike was one of the great finishers. Just thumb a guy in the neck.
It's better than a leg drop. Amanda Nunes taking on Irene Aldana in the main event of the evening. A big-time fight for the bantamweight title. And I've got Nunes in the matchup. And I saw some people saying earlier on, obviously it sucks that you've got somebody like Nunes having to go out there and say this, say that. It's because everybody and their dog's asking if she's going to retire after this fight. And that's not her fault. That's because they're asking the question. You got to answer it. So for me, I do have Amanda Nunes in the matchup, but I think this is going to be a fun fight as it goes on. And if Aldana wins, then Vegas Mexican Independence Day for the UFC. That'll be a fun card for Irene Aldana.
Well, imagine if Yair can beat Alexander Volkanovski too. That's a huge fight coming up soon. I think this should be a really fun fight. I do think Irene Aldana is going to make it a very competitive fight. I don't think she's just going to get absolutely washed in the first couple of rounds. But I do have Nunes. I like the dominant wrestling that she's been able to showcase. So that's why I've got her.
A big time matchup. Make sure you keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks because, again, early in the morning, I'm making bacon. Drinking, contemplating? Is that how it goes with Chief Keef? Matt, we do have a big-time matchup with Marvin Vettori taking on Jared Cannonier. Zarukian taking on Joaquim Silva. Give me that fight. Joaquim Silva, built like a brick you-know-what house. So I think it's going to be a fun card, Matt. 14 total fights on that one. A lot of second time out. The sophomore look, if you will, for a lot of the fighters who are coming off of losses and one debut. So a lot to look forward to on that card. Make sure you tune into it. That one should drop later on tomorrow night. So tune in for it. A Sunday night drop with Fight Night Picks. And a good card coming up from Vancouver, BC.
Yeah, I'm excited for the pay-per-view today. I really am.
All right, make sure you keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. And as we always say, let's get into it.